The vastness of space was silent, but the Zarkonian fleet roared forward like a cosmic storm. 500 warships, each the pinnacle of the Empire's military power, moved in perfect formation toward their next conquest. Grand Admiral Exeral stood on the bridge of his massive command ship, the Dreadfang, his crimson eyes fixed on the distant blue planet. Earth. A primitive world, barely worth consideration, yet it had defied the Empire's authority by refusing to surrender. The Terran Republic had no history of war on a galactic scale, no alliances with the other major civilizations, and no fleet that could rival even the weakest armada in the Empire. Zeril had crushed a dozen star nations in his lifetime, and this would be no different. His ships carried weapons powerful enough to reduce entire planets to ash. The humans had no chance. Yet something felt off. His long, clawed fingers tapped against the command console as he observed the enemy's response, or rather, the lack of one. There were no distress signals, no desperate calls for help, no planetary defense grid activating. Instead, his sensors detected only one warship. It was small compared to the Empire's dreadnoughts, barely a fraction of the Dreadfang's size. Cyril's mandibles clicked in amusement. Was this the best they had? One ship against his unstoppable armada? The bridge crew chuckled, whispering among themselves, mocking the humans' foolishness. Cyril let them enjoy the moment. Soon, this system would burn, and Earth would be another name in the long list of worlds that had fallen before him. Yet, despite the overwhelming odds, the Terran warship did not flee. It floated there in the void, motionless, as if challenging the entire Zarkonian fleet alone. Its black hull reflected little light, making it look like a shadow against the backdrop of space. It had no visible heavy weaponry, no massive turrets or missile bays. It simply remained there, silent and waiting. Cyril frowned. This was not normal. Most species, when faced with the might of the Zarkonian Empire, reacted in predictable ways: panic, surrender, or a futile last stand. But this was something else. "Scan that ship," Exeral ordered, his voice sharp. The crew obeyed, but the results only deepened the mystery. The readings made no sense. The ship had an energy signature unlike anything recorded. No standard shield system, no conventional propulsion, yet somehow it remained steady in space. It was as if the ship did not exist within normal physics. A communication officer turned toward Exeral, his face pale. "Sir, the ship is scanning us." Cyril narrowed his eyes. "So? Let them see the full might of the Empire." But then the officer gulped. "Sir, it's scanning the entire fleet at once." That was impossible. Even the most advanced scanning systems in the Empire could only analyze a few ships at a time. A full fleet scan required time, processing power, and coordination between multiple ships. Yet, within seconds, this single human vessel had gathered complete tactical data on all 500 warships. That wasn't just superior technology, that was something beyond logic. Cyril's instincts screamed at him. He had been in countless battles, and this was the first time he felt something alien to him: uncertainty. But arrogance pushed the feeling aside. He would not be intimidated by a single enemy ship. "Enough games," he growled. "Destroy it." The command was obeyed instantly. Hundreds of Zarkonian warships locked onto the human vessel and unleashed a barrage of plasma beams, torpedoes, and high-energy lances. The darkness of space lit up as the combined firepower of the Empire converged on a single point. Nothing could survive such an onslaught. Yet, as the explosions rippled across the void, the ship remained untouched. The energy blasts that should have annihilated it passed through empty space as if the ship had never been there to begin with. The bridge fell silent. Cyril's mandibles tightened. This wasn't possible. No technology in existence could simply ignore an attack like that. Either it had phased out of reality, or, before he could finish the thought, something changed. The ship, which had remained still all this time, finally moved. But it did not accelerate like a normal spacecraft. It vanished. Gasps filled the bridge as the sensor screens turned to static. The ship had disappeared from every known detection system in the Empire. even the advanced subspace scanners, which could track ships moving faster than light. It was as if the human vessel had ceased to exist. Panic spread among the fleet. Where did it go? A commander shouted over the comms. Zero felt his skin grow cold. This was not a normal enemy. This was something else. Something beyond his understanding. His fleet was the most powerful force in the galaxy, yet they had no idea how to fight something they couldn't even track. And then the destruction began. The rear formation of the fleet suddenly exploded. 5 ships gone in an instant. Their hulls were not breached, their shields not pierced, they simply imploded. No enemy fire, no warning, just pure annihilation. Then, more explosions erupted. Warships were being picked off one by one, torn apart by an unseen force. The fleet was in chaos. Frantic voices screamed over the comms. We're under attack. We can't see them. We can't silence. Another ship lost. Cyril's claws dug into his command chair. His fleet, his unstoppable armada, was being slaughtered by an enemy that did not exist. He had been so certain of victory, so confident in the Empire's dominance. But now, as ship after ship vanished into oblivion, he realized the terrible truth. The Terrans had not been silent out of fear. They had not refused to surrender out of arrogance. They had simply been waiting. And now, the Zarkonian Empire was learning a lesson it would never forget. Humanity was not prey. It was the predator. The bridge of the Dreadfang was in chaos. The once mighty Zarkonian fleet was being torn apart, not by an armada, not by planetary defenses, but by a single Terran warship that moved like a ghost in the void. Grand Admiral Exirol stood frozen, his claws gripping the edges of his command console as he watched the impossible unfold. The T.S.S. Revenant, the only human ship in sight, was nowhere and everywhere at once. It would appear for the briefest of moments, just long enough for the sensors to catch a flicker of its presence, and then it would vanish. Every time it reappeared, a new part of his fleet was being ripped apart by an unseen force. It didn't fire conventional weapons, nor did it use missiles or energy cannons. Instead, it manipulated something beyond Exirol's understanding, something that rendered the Zarkonian fleet completely defenseless. He barked orders, his voice sharp with desperation. Find it! Track its movements! But the officers were already scrambling, their fingers moving frantically across the controls. Every sensor, every targeting system, every piece of advanced technology at their disposal was being pushed to its limits, and yet nothing worked. The Revenant defied all known detection methods. It moved like a phantom, phasing in and out of existence, leaving only destruction in its wake. The rear section of the fleet was in flames, warships crumbling as if an invisible hand had crushed them like paper. There were no survivors, no distress calls, just silence where mighty ships had once been. Cyril, second in command, Commander Vorkal, turned with wide, terrified eyes. Admiral, we are losing too many ships. We must regroup. But Exirol did not respond. His mind was racing, struggling to make sense of what was happening. He had faced countless enemies before rebel factions, rival empires, planetary militias, but never had he seen a weapon like this. This was not normal warfare. This was not technology. It was something else entirely. The Revenant suddenly reappeared, hovering in the middle of the battlefield. Cyril's heart pounded as he finally got a clear look at it. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its black hull seemed to absorb light, pulsing with an eerie glow that looked almost organic. There were no visible engines, no exhaust, no heat signature. It was silent, unmoving, yet it radiated a presence that sent a chill down his spine. He could feel it not just as a ship, but as something alive. Fire everything, he roared, his voice filled with fury and fear. Every remaining warship turned their weapons toward the Revenant. Plasma cannons, high-energy lances, torpedoes, every destructive force the Zarkonian fleet had to offer was unleashed at once. The space around the Revenant lit up like a supernova, an explosion powerful enough to annihilate entire battle stations. The bridge crew held their breath, their eyes locked onto the screens, waiting to see the Terran ship reduced to dust. But when the light faded, the Revenant was still there. Not a scratch. Not even a flicker of shield disruption. It was as if the attack had never happened. And then, before Xyril could react, something even worse occurred. The weapon systems of the Zarkonian fleet shut down. Across every remaining ship, alarms blared as energy cannons powered off and missile bays locked shut. Every single warship was rendered defenseless. Engineers scrambled to reboot the systems, but nothing responded. It was as if an unseen force had simply taken control of the fleet's technology. A deep, eerie silence filled the Dreadfang's bridge. Then, without warning, a voice echoed through the ship's communication system. A voice that did not belong to any Zarkonian. Weapons disabled. Shields nullified. Propulsion frozen. You have lost. It was a human voice. Calm, emotionless, but filled with something far more terrifying than anger. Confidence. This was an execution. The Revenant had been toying with them, testing them, observing their tactics, analyzing their response, and shutting them down piece by piece. There had never been a battle. The outcome had been decided the moment the Terran warship arrived. Panic spread among the fleet as one by one, not from an external force, not from weapon fire, but from within. The Revenant was not just attacking them. It was reprogramming their ships, forcing their reactors to overload, making them self-destruct without warning. Cyril's fleet was being wiped out by their own technology. The Admiral's hands trembled as he realized something horrifying. The humans were not fighting back. They had already won before the battle even started. This was not just superior firepower or advanced tactics. This was something beyond the limits of Zarkonian understanding. This was not technology as they knew it. This was something far more dangerous. Cyril turned to his crew, his voice barely above a whisper. We have to retreat. But before he could give the order, the entire ship shuddered. The Revenant had turned its attention to the Dreadfang. Everything went dark. The lights, the control panels, even the emergency systems all offline. The crew was trapped, floating in the void, helpless against whatever came next. Then, the voice returned. Cold. Absolute. You came to conquer. You leave with nothing. Let your empire know humanity does not kneel. Cyril felt true fear for the first time in his life. This was no ordinary war. This was a message. And as the Revenant vanished into the void, leaving only burning wreckage behind, he knew that message would shake the Zarkonian Empire to its core. The humans had something no other species possessed. A weapon that could not be fought, could not be reasoned with. And now, the entire galaxy would know it. The Zarkonian war fleet stretched across the void, a wall of destruction advancing toward its next conquest. Over 1,000 warships, each carrying weapons capable of reducing planets to dust, moved in perfect formation. Their target was Outpost Theta 9, a lone Terran military station guarding the outer edges of human space. The humans had dared to defy the Empire, refusing surrender, and now they would be eradicated. Admiral Xyril stood tall on the bridge of his flagship, the Doombringer, watching the Terran station on the view screen. It was small, barely the size of a city, with no visible fleet to protect it. His intelligence reports had confirmed what he already suspected: humanity had no armada capable of facing the Empire. They had ships, yes, but nothing that could stand against the might of the Zarkonian war machine. This battle would be swift and absolute. Yet, something was wrong. The Terran station had not sent distress calls. It had not requested reinforcements. There were no last-minute evacuations, no desperate attempts at diplomacy. Instead, the humans had simply locked down their station and remained silent. It was as if they were waiting for the attack. That uneasy feeling crept into Xyril's mind, but he pushed it aside. Humanity was primitive, foolish. No amount of strategy could save them from overwhelming force. Admiral, one of his officers reported, "We have detected a single Terran vessel approaching at high speed." Cyril narrowed his eyes. One ship? The officer hesitated. Yes, sir. It's moving extremely fast. A single human warship against an entire armada? This was insanity. Cyril leaned forward, intrigued. Magnify? It had no visible engines, no exposed weaponry, just a smooth, almost predatory design. Its energy readings were unlike anything in the Zarkonian database. Then, in a move that sent a chill through the bridge, the human ship slowed to a stop directly in front of the fleet. It wasn't evading, wasn't attacking. It was simply waiting. The bridge fell silent. Cyril clenched his jaw. Destroy it. Immediately, the Zarkonian warships opened fire, unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts, torpedoes, and energy beams. The space between the fleets exploded with fire and destruction, a storm of light meant to erase the human ship from existence. But when the explosions cleared, the ship was untouched. The bridge crew gasped. Impossible. Someone whispered. The sensors showed something that defied logic. The weapons hadn't missed, but neither had they hit. It was as if the human ship was simply not there when the attacks arrived. As if it existed in a space where physics did not apply. Then, without warning, the human vessel moved .no acceleration. No buildup, it vanished and reappeared behind the first line of Zarkonian ships. Before the enemy could react, 5 warships imploded at once, crushed by a force no one could detect. The destruction was absolute, no explosions, no energy discharges, just warships collapsing inward like they had been erased from the universe. Panic spread through the fleet. The human ship vanished again, and more ships were destroyed, silent, unseen, unstoppable. The Zarkonians fired wildly into the void, but their weapons hit nothing. Cyril felt his blood run cold. This was not possible. This was not how battles worked. Warfare was about numbers, strategy, firepower. The enemy had one ship. One. This should have been a massacre in the Empire's favor. Instead, his mighty armada was being hunted like prey. Then, the ship appeared again, right in front of the Doombringer. Cyril's breath caught in his throat. The black hull of the Terran ship pulsed with an eerie glow, and then without a sound, the entire weapon system of the Zarkonian fleet shut down. Every gun, every torpedo, every energy lance, dead. Alarms blared across the bridge. His officers scrambled, trying to restart the systems, but nothing responded. They were defenseless. Then, the comms crackled to life. A voice, cold and emotionless, filled the bridge. You cannot win this battle. It was a human voice. Calm. Certain. Terrifying. Cyril gritted his teeth. You think we will surrender? There was a pause. Then the voice spoke again. Surrender? No. You don't understand. This is not a war. This is a demonstration. And then the real slaughter began. The human ship moved faster than thought, blinking from one side of the battlefield to the other. Entire sections of the Zarkonian fleet vanished, torn apart by a force they couldn't see, couldn't counter, couldn't even comprehend. Ships did not explode. They simply ceased to exist. Crew members screamed over the comms, their voices cut short as their ships were erased one by one. Cyril's hands trembled. He had never known fear like this. The Zarkonian Empire was the most powerful force in the galaxy. And yet, in the span of minutes, it was being dismantled by a single Terran warship. This wasn't war. This was annihilation. Cyril's voice was barely a whisper. We have to retreat, but it was too late. The human ship reappeared directly above the Doombringer, and the lights on the bridge flickered. The systems failed. The artificial gravity collapsed. The crew began floating helplessly as the ship died around them. The voice returned, final and absolute. Never return. And then, the Doombringer's engines reactivated, but not by their command. The ship was being forced into hyperspace, along with the few surviving remnants of the fleet. Within seconds, they were ejected from the system, hurled across the void, left with nothing but the wreckage of their armada and a warning burned into their minds. The battle had not been won, because the humans had never considered it a battle to begin with. The impossible had happened. And now, The Zirconian Empire knew one thing for certain: humanity was not to be challenged. Admiral Exerol stood in the dimly lit war chamber, his claws digging into the edge of the command table as he stared at the impossible reports before him. The Zirconian Empire had ruled the stars for centuries, crushing every enemy, wiping out countless civilizations, expanding their reach with absolute dominance. But now, everything had changed. Humanity, an upstart species, insignificant in numbers and technology, had done what no empire, no federation, no species had ever managed. They had stopped the Zirconians. No, they had done more than that. They had humiliated them. Ziral's mandibles clicked in frustration as he played the battle recordings again. A single Terran warship had annihilated an entire fleet, defying every known law of warfare. It had moved like a phantom, appearing and disappearing at will, erasing ships from existence without leaving wreckage behind. It had hunted them, not fought them. And worst of all, it had let the survivors escape. That was no act of mercy. It was a warning. His officers stood around him, their eyes filled with the same fear he felt but refused to show. The Empire had never faced an enemy like this before. Enemies could be studied, their weaknesses exposed, their defenses shattered. But this was something beyond their understanding. The human warship had disarmed them without firing a shot. It had shut down their weapons, overridden their systems, and forced their surrender before they had even realized what was happening. How? "I want answers," he growled, his voice barely containing his rage. "I want to know how they did this. I want to know what technology they used. I want to know how a single Terran ship destroyed a battle fleet of the Empire's finest warriors." Silence. No one had an answer. Finally, Commander Vorkal, his most trusted officer, stepped forward. "Admiral, the truth is, we don't know." His voice was quiet, hesitant. The human vessel did not use conventional weapons. It did not emit any detectable energy signatures. It did not register on our targeting systems. It was as if it wasn't there. Cyril's eyes burned with fury. That was not an answer. That was admitting defeat. He would not accept that. "If we do not understand it, we must capture it." His claws curled into a fist. "The next time we encounter this Terran warship, we will not engage it as before. We will trap it." A murmur spread across the officers. It was a bold plan, but Exerol knew there was no other option. The Zirconian Empire could not allow itself to be humiliated again. If they showed weakness, their enemies would rise against them. Their dominion over the stars would crumble. The next battle would not be fought in open space. It would be fought on his terms. The trap 2 weeks later, the Zirconian fleet lay in wait near the Shalgzar Nebula, a vast cloud of ionized gas that would disrupt any ship's ability to escape through hyperspace. Ziral had chosen this location carefully. The humans had proven their warship was unlike anything in the galaxy, but even they could not ignore the laws of physics. The nebula would prevent them from using whatever strange method they had for disappearing. This time, they would have nowhere to run. The moment came sooner than expected. The Terran warship arrived alone, just as before. It did not seem aware of the trap. It moved with the same eerie confidence, drifting toward the Zirconian fleet as if it had already won. Cyril gave the signal. The trap was sprung. Dozens of gravity wells activated around the battlefield, creating a powerful force field that locked the human ship in place. At the same time, EMP bursts were launched, designed to cripple any electronic system. The Zirconians had never needed such measures before, but against this thing, no tactic was too extreme. The human warship flickered for a moment, its hull shimmering as it resisted the effects of the trap. Then, for the first time, it stopped moving. Cyril's heart pounded. "Fire all weapons!" The fleet unleashed everything. Plasma cannons, ion lances, torpedoes all targeted the trapped ship. The space around it exploded in a brilliant display of destruction. This time, there was no chance for it to escape. It was caught. This time, it would be destroyed. Or so he thought. As the light from the explosions faded, Cyril felt something cold settle in his chest. The Terran warship was still there. Unaffected.no damage.no signs of strain. It was watching. Then, the impossible happened. The energy from the Zarkonian weapons began reversing. The plasma bolts, the ion beams, they turned around mid-space, as if time itself was unraveling. The fleet's own firepower was sent back at them. Zero barely had time to react before the first wave of his own attacks slammed into his ships. Destruction spread through the fleet like wildfire. The human warship moved again, but not as before. It did not flicker or vanish. Instead, it walked through reality itself. One moment it was in front of the fleet, the next it was inside their formation. A ghost among metal. Ship after ship imploded, their cores overloaded by forces the Zarkonians did not understand. Crew members screamed as their vessels collapsed into nothingness. On the bridge of the Doombringer, Zero felt true terror. His trap had failed. His fleet was being erased. His empire's greatest warships were being reduced to shadows. Then, the voice returned. You cannot trap what you do not understand. Cyril's claws trembled. This was not a battle. This was a lesson. And humanity was the teacher. The human warship turned toward the Doombringer, and for the first time in his life, Admiral Exerol knew desperation. He had never begged before. Never pleaded. But now, with his empire crumbling around him, his voice cracked. Please, no more. The ship paused. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, the human voice spoke one last time. Leave. Tell your empire. We are not prey. We are not to be hunted. The next time you come, there will be no mercy. And just like that, the human ship vanished, leaving behind only silence and destruction. Cyril collapsed into his seat. He had faced war before, but this was something far worse. The Galactic Council gathered in a massive chamber floating above the core of the Andromeda Nexus, the political heart of the known universe. Representatives from thousands of civilizations, empires, and federations sat in their designated places, their expressions tense and uncertain. The room, usually filled with endless debates and diplomatic arguments, was now consumed by an unnatural silence. Every eye was fixed on the center stage, where Admiral Exerol, once one of the most feared military commanders of the Zarkonian Empire, now stood a broken figure, a shadow of the warrior he had once been. Zerol's mandibles clicked nervously as he stared at the gathered officials. They had not believed him before. No one had. When he had first reported the disaster, the Zarkonian High Command had accused him of cowardice, of incompetence. They had dismissed his warnings as the ramblings of a defeated commander. But now, the truth was undeniable. The humans were not a minor species. They were not a primitive force that could be conquered. They were something else. Something terrifying. Taking a deep breath, Exerol activated the holographic display. In an instant, the recorded footage of the battle appeared in the air above him. The council members leaned forward, their eyes widening as they saw it for themselves the Zarkonian fleet, one of the most powerful armadas in the galaxy, reduced to nothing. The footage played on. The Terran warship emerged from the void, moving without sound, without effort. It was alone, a single vessel facing an entire armada. And yet, it did not hesitate. It did not falter. The first Zarkonian ships opened fire, launching their most powerful weapons. Plasma beams, torpedoes, energy lances, all of them struck, but none of them mattered. The human vessel absorbed the attacks, bending reality itself as it sent the energy back at its attackers. Zero watched as the faces of the council members twisted in disbelief. They saw the Zarkonian fleet implode from within, their most advanced ships crushed without a fight. The human ship moved like a phantom, appearing and disappearing at will, tearing through their formation like a predator among insects. Then came the voice that had haunted Exerol's mind since the battle. You will leave. You will tell them. The next time you come, there will be no mercy. The footage ended. Silence hung in the chamber like a storm waiting to break. Zero looked at the gathered leaders. I do not bring you threats, he said, his voice heavy. I bring you a warning. Humanity is not what we believe them to be. They are not weak. They are not prey. They are something else. Something far more dangerous than any of us imagine. The Exilari Empress, a towering figure with crystalline skin that shimmered under the artificial lights, leaned forward. Her voice, usually cold and calculated, held an edge of uncertainty. And you expect us to simply fear them? To bow to this species? Cyril's mandibles twitched. I expect you to understand that war with them is suicide. The Zarkonian Empire believed itself to be invincible. We have fought and crushed countless civilizations. And yet, in mere minutes, the humans prove that we are nothing to them. He gestured to the holo display again. We threw everything we had at them. They did not fight us. They ended us. A deep rumble filled the chamber as Supreme Chancellor Vortag of the Kravex Dominion, a reptilian warrior race feared for their brutal conquests, let out a low growl. No species is unbeatable, he hissed. Every empire has a weakness. Every enemy can be studied and defeated. Cyril clenched his fists. He had once thought the same. He had believed the Zarkonian Empire was supreme, that no force in the galaxy could challenge them. But he had seen the truth. The humans did not fight like any known species. They did not conquer. They erased. You think this is a war you can win? Cyril snapped, his voice rising. Then tell me, Chancellor, what do you do when your enemy is no longer bound by the laws of war? What do you do when your enemy refuses to play by the rules of physics? He pointed a claw at the holo display. We do not understand what the humans are. They wield weapons we cannot see, technology we cannot detect. They control space itself. The chamber remained deathly quiet. No one had an answer. Then, from the shadows, a voice spoke. Perhaps they are not a species at all. All eyes turned to Grand Scholar Iskareth, the oldest being in the room, a being whose wisdom spanned thousands of years. His wrinkled face was unreadable as he gazed at the projection. Perhaps we have made a mistake, he continued. We assumed the humans were like us, that they were a biological species, bound by time and evolution. But what if they are something different? A shiver ran through the room. The thought had crossed Exril's mind before, but he had dismissed it as paranoia. Yet now, after witnessing what he had seen, he was no longer sure. Iskareth folded his ancient hands together. We must ask ourselves, are the humans truly alive, or are they something more? Something greater than mere flesh and blood? Cyril's mandibles clicked. He did not have an answer. He wasn't sure anyone did. Finally, the Supreme Chancellor exhaled slowly. Then what do you propose we do? Cyril turned off the holo display. We do what we should have done from the beginning. His eyes burned with intensity. We stay away. We do not provoke them. We do not threaten them. We do not test their patience. His voice dropped lower. We warn every empire, every species, every ruler across the stars. He took a deep breath. We tell the galaxy that humanity is not to be trifled with. Silence stretched once more, but this time it was not uncertainty that filled the air. It was fear. The Galactic Council had spent centuries shaping the fate of the universe. They had made and broken empires, determined the rise and fall of civilizations. But now, they faced a truth none of them could deny. For the first time in history, the galaxy had met its match.